Hello, this training presentation is for the role of Volunteer Coordinator. My name is Janice Miller, and I'm the National Volunteer Coordinator for the REC Foundation. You see my email and my phone number listed here in case you have questions about this presentation. We'll also repeat this information at the end. As you know, volunteers are key resources for every event, and we recommend that you have a designated volunteer coordinator that is separate from the event partner. So event partners, you really need to focus on running the overall event and assign someone to be a volunteer coordinator that works with you so that they can really focus on the care, the training, the development of the volunteers. This presentation will help that volunteer coordinator position to recruit, assign, train, and also retain volunteers for all programs. And we're also including some best practices that were shared at this year's REC Foundation Event Partners Summit. Now, the prerequisite before viewing this presentation, you really should read the Volunteer Planning and Staffing Guide. And this is just a couple pages, and you can find it on the Event Partner Resources and Documents page. The link is embedded here in this presentation. Click on the appropriate tab for whatever program you're in, and then find the Judge Volunteer Resources button to reveal the posted materials for this role. So let's get started. As you see from our agenda, we'll be covering a variety of topics, including title updates, volunteer resources, database management platforms and scheduling apps, robotevents.com, volunteer recruitment and training, how to retain volunteers and keep them coming back with volunteer care and engagement techniques, and we'll end with a summary of best practices that were shared by fellow event partners and volunteer coordinators like you. We'll begin with a quick update on 3 volunteer role titles. We always get recurring questions from volunteers on these particular titles, so this year we've agreed to update them to make it clearer and easier for potential volunteers to understand their duties. So we start with referee/scorekeeper. This is a consolidated title you may have seen as referee, referee scorekeeper, or even referee TM mobile to call out the mobile scoring devices. Using referee/scorekeeper clarifies the role because it refers to the action being performed. Note that for smaller events, of course, one person will be the referee/scorekeeper, playing the roles of both referee during the match and scorekeeper at the end of the match when counting scoring objects. For larger events where volunteers are plentiful, you may have separate roles, one for referee and one for scorekeeper, so the slash in the new name allows for the greater flexibility based on your event size. VEX TM operator is the new term for the person operating tournament manager software at the head table. You may have seen this role called TM scorekeeper, but we received consistent questions on whether this person was supposed to be scoring on the field or not. So VEX TM operator takes the guesswork out of this role so that the volunteer knows they are working with tournament manager software only, which means starting and stopping matches, displaying final match scores on the screen for the audience to view. We also polled our event partners, and the majority responded for using the term MC far above using the term announcer. Now, if you have a larger event and a sponsor supplies their own announcer, this is fine. Just have your MC work with the announcer to coordinate who says what. But in the majority of cases, you will only have 1 or 2 MCs. So please use these titles moving forward, and you will also see the new terms reflected in the documentation on the REC Foundation website. RoboticsEducation.org underwent a much-needed facelift earlier this fall. We hope the new site design makes finding volunteer resources much easier than in the past. To find event partner resources, click on the large button on the home page, or you can also click on the event partners text in the top navigation bar. Likewise, for volunteers, do the same. You can click on the button or the text in the top navigation bar. We've provided the direct links to these pages with the URLs you see here, and we highly recommend you bookmark these pages in your browser for easy access. We will be referring to these pages several times throughout this presentation. Once you are on the Event Partner Resources and Documents page, you will see 3 tabs at the top corresponding to each program: VEX IQ Challenge, VEX Robotics Competition, and VEX U. Click on the tab appropriate for your chosen program and you'll find the following buttons: If you click on the Judge/Volunteer Resources button, you'll reveal the materials such as volunteer role guides. We highly recommend printing the volunteer role guides for your volunteers to refer to and use as a basic training guide at your event. So you can make hard copies of those. You will also find a plethora of resources to help equip volunteers with the necessary materials for your event, including award scripts and calculators. There's a community service certificate template that you can customize by adding your event name and details for your specific volunteers. And you'll also find the schedule of training calls hosted by the REC Foundation for event partners and referees. This document also contains training presentations like this one for other volunteer roles. Now, the Event Planning button reveals multiple resources to help you plan a successful event, and the most important for the volunteer coordinator role will be the Volunteer Planning and Staffing Guide. Again, we recommended that as a prerequisite before viewing this presentation, and this is definitely essential reading for you. It offers not only tips and tricks, but also example staffing plans for small, medium, and large size events. Now, under the Publicity and Media Resources button, you can find communication resources and also the volunteer recruitment flyer, which is available for you to customize for your specific event and either print or email to attract potential volunteers in your community. We'll show you exactly where to find the Volunteer Planning and Staffing Guide because it is so important for you, really as the first place to start as a volunteer coordinator. This will help you not only plan your event, but also discover other resources that will help you and your volunteers. We created this guide to help make staffing volunteers for your event as easy as possible. Now, you can find it in two locations on the Event Partner Resources and Documents page. You can find it under the Event Planning button, and you can also find it under the Judge/Volunteer Resources button. We put it in two locations to make it easier to find, and because it's relevant to both event planning and, of course, your own volunteers. Now that we've showed you what you can find under the Event Partner Resources page, let's talk about what you can find under the Volunteer Resources page. Here is where you want to direct your volunteers to visit. This page contains resources for specific volunteer roles. It contains guides, training, scripts, and any information they will need really to perform their role successfully. We also recommend, as we said prior, printing out the volunteer role guides as hard copies and giving to your volunteers at training events you host in person or even on the morning of your event. Now that we've shared the available resources and materials and where to find them, let's talk about volunteer management and recruitment strategies. Let's start with volunteer management. For large events on the scale of the VEX Robotics World Championship, a robust volunteer database and management platform is required. When you're scheduling around 800 volunteers per day, a connected database program is essential. Now, we are always striving to improve our volunteer database, and this year we are moving to an entirely new system called Shiftboard to track volunteer data and scheduling, and it even allows for self-scheduling of specific shifts for the World Championship. Of course, our dream is to have one central searchable volunteer database one day, but we are not yet at that stage. So moving to Shiftboard is the next step, but for this year, Shiftboard will only be used for scheduling shifts at VEX Worlds. However, if you have local volunteers or key Rockstar volunteers who you know would be interested in VEX Worlds, you can direct them also to register here. We will be opening volunteer registration for VEX Worlds on November 1st, so look for announcements around that time. Now, any volunteer can register in the Shiftboard database. If they are only interested in local events, there is a checkbox there that asks them if they're interested in local events or worlds or both. If they're interested just in local, we will simply send them to our regional support managers in their area so they can find your local events and volunteer for them. Now, there are volunteer management and scheduling apps you can use for your local, regional, and even state championships, many that do not cost a dime. Several of these apps are free, and you only pay a fee if you need to upgrade to use premium features like adding custom fields. Honestly, many people do not use a volunteer management platform when running smaller events. But to make life easier, we'd like to recommend several free methods that are quick and easy to use, and this can help take the stress out of organizing volunteers and making sure all shifts are covered and all role gaps are filled. So many of our event partners use Volunteer Spot, which is now called signup.com. This is a free app with basic scheduling features that fit most event needs. Sign Up Genius is another favorite app that has similar functionality. Other volunteer coordinators choose to create their own Google form. That way they can customize it however they want, and Google Forms will automatically dump the data into a nice clean Excel sheet format. A few even mentioned using a scheduling plugin for WordPress, so if you are familiar with site design in WordPress, that may also be the tool for you. It's your choice. Just to show you an example, we'll share some screenshots from signup.com, since this app is the most popular among our current event partners and volunteer coordinators. This was formerly known as Volunteer Spot, but recently underwent a rebranding. Now, signup.com allows you to create volunteer roles along with the number of volunteers needed in that role and displays specific shifts in date and time format. So here you can see I created a basic example using some of our most common volunteer roles. I listed team check-in, MC, referee/scorekeeper, and you see here that it shows the shift or the hours needed and then the number of volunteers needed in that particular role. So then, when a potential volunteer gets the link to your signup.com event, they will see a calendar display of when volunteers are needed by date. By clicking on the date of the event, they can then see what roles are needed, how many, and at what times or shifts during the day. With a simple click of a button, they can sign up for the role of their choice. You then can control whether they get the role automatically or whether it comes to you first for approval by customizing settings within the app. Now, it's quick and easy to set up, so we suggest just setting up a free account and trying it out. It might really help you with your organization of volunteers. Now, another example we shared with you, if you want to create your own custom fields and have complete control over what volunteers input, you can simply create a Google form. Google Forms are included in the free list of apps with any Google account. So if you have Gmail, for example, you just click on the app's icon and scroll to the Forms button. Now, you do not have to use Gmail in order to use a Google Forms. You only need a Google account, which is also free. Now, if you're not familiar with Google Forms, we included a link that will tell you more about the functionality and what this app can do for you. Here's a basic example of a Google form you can create. Once the prospective volunteer inputs their information, the form will populate into a spreadsheet in Google Sheets for easy access to view and sort data. Google Forms is just another option for creating a volunteer management system for regional events. Feel free to explore this and other methods and apps. We're just citing a few here of the most used examples in this presentation. Explore what's available and you'll find what best suits your own event. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about robot events. So the new version of robot events that was released in August has many improved features. The most important one for volunteer coordinators being the new volunteer tab. This is now a required information field when event partners are creating their events. The new section is great for volunteer coordinators because it helps give your potential volunteers better information and limits the number of emails and calls the event partner or yourself will have to field. So to help guide your potential volunteers, give them very specific information on this tab in order to set their expectations for the event day. Be sure to include the following at minimum. You want to include the volunteer coordinator phone and email, this again may be yourself, any helpful information such as required experience, time commitment, or if meals or snacks are included, whether volunteers can bring their kids, or even if they can volunteer for certain shifts but don't have to stay all day. So the more information you include, the better you can attract good volunteers. Of course, make sure you include the link to your event agenda and also the volunteer guides and training documents we've mentioned here on the roboticseducation.org website. Post the link to your chosen volunteer scheduling app, Google Form, or any method you are using for automated sign-up if you are using one at all. Make it easy for a volunteer to register for your event. If it is confusing, they may leave the page. So to help make it easier for you and the event partner, we've included a template with sample verbiage to include when creating the event. You can find this template on the Event Partner Resources and Documents page under the Judge/Volunteer Resources button. and it's labeled as Template for Volunteer Tab and Robot Events. Now let's talk about volunteer recruitment strategies. You need to start as early as possible. Now, when you're soliciting volunteers, make sure you have continuous contact. For example, if you have an event coming up this weekend, if they say no, that doesn't mean they never could volunteer. Schedules and lives change daily, so ask if you can take down their name and email to let them know when the next event is. So maybe another date or time will work better with their schedule. Now, if you have people who are really interested and want to help out, but there is no way they can make it to your physical event, let them know we are also looking for people to judge the online challenges. So this is a role they can volunteer from the comfort of their own home. All they need is a computer and an internet connection to participate. And we have online challenges covering a broad range of topics, so no special skills are needed because we'll match applicants with a challenge that suits their interests for judging. Just tell them to email our volunteer account, the same one on the website, to volunteer@roboticseducation.org if they are interested. So this email will come directly to me as the National Volunteer Coordinator, and I can then reach out to them personally to discuss interests and assign them to a challenge. Note that judging begins in January and the time commitment varies, so we can find a spot that fits most schedules. So how do you start recruiting volunteers? If you're a seasoned event partner or volunteer coordinator, you know that you can get a good bunch of dedicated volunteers right from your local teams and surrounding areas. Parents, school administrators, and teachers all make great volunteers, along with siblings of competitors and others from local teams in your area. You may also be surprised how easy it can be to get volunteers to help. Often it just takes the initial asking, which can seem like a daunting task, but really it shouldn't be. Now, I used to work at a global software company before I came to the REC Foundation, and I would recruit software engineers and designers to volunteer at local VEX events in my area. Every single person who volunteered always came back with a great story of their experience, and many became repeat volunteers year after year. So often, you just have to ask. Now, many local businesses are looking for long-term team-building activities for their employees, and volunteering at VEX events offer many different options and dates for a great solution to team building. Don't forget local sponsors. If you have any organizations contributing monetary support to your event, that would also be a great source of volunteers. Now, we've discovered that there are also several regional chain stores that have volunteer incentive programs. So for example, if you get 10 volunteers from their store, some may even write you a check as a donation. Event partners have shared with us stores doing this such as Best Buy, Target, Kimberly-Clark, and even Walmart. So call up your favorite local chain store and ask about their volunteer programs. Another thing to do is make it a family affair. Remember that kids can be great field resetters, so invite your volunteers to bring their families. They can all get inspired together, and they don't have to get a babysitter. Now, usually you want kids to be over 6 years of age, but as long as they can pay attention and take direction, they can have a really fun time being a field resetter, being a part of the action, and also volunteering right alongside with their parents. There's also many volunteer resources to explore. We've listed a few here, including volunteermatch.org. REC Foundation has an account there, and we will post general opportunities guiding people to our event locator on robotevents.com. Now, the connectory.org is in partnership with Volunteer Match and focuses specifically on nonprofits and connecting with STEM opportunities. Idealist.org is yet another service listing volunteer opportunities, and the communitycore.org focuses on STEM subjects, partnering with volunteers, nonprofits, and schools to close the tech skills gap. Now, one event partner reported STEMfire.com. This is a local Texas service connecting volunteers with STEM opportunities also, and you can list your opportunities on this site. So we recommend doing a quick Google search in your local area to see if there might be a regional program you can post your opportunities with. And of course, don't forget social media. If you or your local schools have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the like, we recently discovered there is also a dedicated LinkedIn site for volunteers. We've included the link here, so encourage you to check it out. Now, make sure you post clear information about the roles you need and direct people to your event link on robotevents.com so that they can sign up directly and get the most information they can and details about your event. So whatever your potential volunteers are interested in, help them identify those causes and choose the ones whose passions align with your organization's cause. There are plenty of people looking to volunteer, but the key to enjoyable volunteerism is finding people who feel that your cause truly resonates with them. So where can you find them in addition to local businesses? Check out schools and local colleges and universities. You'll find that many have class requirements for community service. And think of semester breaks too, where students volunteering in groups can be very popular because they can do it together. Many scholarships have community service hours requirements, and VEX events can fill those hours fast. The ROTC is also a great source of volunteers, and many event partners have reported to us that not only repeated engagement from the ROTC, but also really dependable volunteers that you can count on because they are very focused and disciplined. Also, look into the local University College of Engineering, robotics or engineering clubs. Don't forget fraternities and sororities because again, many are looking to earn community service hours and get engaged. Explore the university website as you can find contacts to most of the groups listed here. Also, don't forget pre-service teachers and student teachers. Those who are studying for a degree in education and teaching are excellent candidates for volunteering at your robotics event. And the added bonus is that they have chosen to work with kids and have studied for it, so can be ideal for communicating with your teams and also for keeping order. Now also you want to identify untapped resources for volunteers. So get creative, such as local community groups and even church groups. Contact them to recruit volunteers, and you can also volunteer yourself as a guest speaker or to give a brief presentation or set up a table and hand out flyers at their monthly gathering or event. Consider your local maker community. If you have a tech shop or maker space in your area, look at the local UAW, your Chamber of Commerce. Library and museums are other great places to post flyers and even contact them directly. Of course, look into local engineering society organizations because they'll host events or gatherings on a regular basis, like the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the National Society of Black Engineers, the Society of Women Engineers, and many, many more. So check around and see what your local area has to offer, and you may be surprised how many sources of volunteers you really do have at your fingertips. So as you're pitching volunteerism to companies or individuals, you really need to point out what is in it for them. So it's not just a benefit for you for getting volunteers at your event, but there's also many intrinsic benefits that people can enjoy of all ages. So be sure to communicate these benefits. For example, get inspired. Now, many adults are discouraged by what's being taught in today's schools, and they worry about the next generation's ability to carry on. So it's truly awe-inspiring to see students work together on school stuff on a Saturday morning or evenings after school where they aren't being graded. They're just doing it for the love of robotics. Fuel your passion. You can ignite sparks for folks that are feeling the monotony of their daily routine, especially if they're in a job that has them in a cubicle all day. So it's a whole new world. Get them excited about something they love. Not just for engineers, but think about accountants and administrators. Really any job would benefit from volunteering to get out and just have something that's so different from their day-to-day in and out job, and they'll really find some inspiration here. They can also learn new skills, so they can challenge themselves to learn something new, even if it's outside their comfort zone. It's a chance to really expand their skills base and include experience on resumes, especially if you're looking at high school and college kids who can play really great volunteer roles and it looks really good on a resume. Also, they can expand their network, meet others who are like-minded and support the same cause. It's a unique way to meet new people and expand your circle just for the networking benefit of it. You can also get exposure to new ways of doing things. You can learn new ways of managing, brainstorming, and problem solving and what another organization does. Also, mention what you do well. In other words, you could say, sign up to help check in teams at our next event and see how we've perfected event registration. For example, so you can use it as a team building experience also. We mentioned this earlier. You can pitch this to companies, teams, or departments at local businesses who are looking to create a sense of camaraderie, encourage stronger relationships between teammates, and build teams while giving back to the community at the same time. So once you have your volunteers, you're going to need to then train them. Now, there are several different ways that you can train volunteers, and we listed 4 of the most common here. So you can train them in person. We highly recommend hosting an orientation if you have time. A lot of event partners have shared with us that they host a night before event. And what they do here is the night before their event, if their event is on a Saturday, for example, they'll host this on a Friday. And a limited number of volunteers who are able to make it can come to this night before event. And this is when setup takes place. But once everything is set up, they will run through a couple practice matches so that key volunteers get the feel for kind of the flow of the event and the flow of the matches if they've never volunteered in that position before. Now, another thing you can do is host online conference calls or webinars, having a central number to call in where people can listen to you, or even having a phone call with them one-on-one. Now, we at the REC Foundation offer some of these, and we'll tell you about those on the next slide. Another online way to train volunteers is with printed materials and handouts, having them download. So we've mentioned to you the various sites here that you can find both event partner information about volunteers and places to direct volunteers to find information on the roboticseducation.org site. So directing them to go here, download this particular handout, in other words, the role guides, and make that mandatory reading before they come to your event. You can also do videos. If you have the time to post videos yourselves, we've had several event partners do these custom for their event, and this is self-paced training, and you can make this required viewing for your volunteers. So again, if you have time to do that, we highly encourage that. At certain years, we offer here through REC Foundation referee videos. I know we offered that last year, and this year we're also going to offer some of those as well. So keep watching your event partner resources page and volunteer resources page for any additional training material that we keep adding throughout the season. I mentioned some volunteer training that we offer at the REC Foundation for your volunteers. So we do have REC Foundation training calls that we offer every month for both event partners, and we also have live volunteer training for referees. Now, you can see the schedule for this posted at the top of the volunteer resources page, and we also have the call schedule posted for any volunteer positions that we have calls for. We also have training PowerPoint presentations. For example, the one that you're watching now for volunteer coordinators is such a video. We have training for judges and inspectors in this live recorded PowerPoint presentation training as well. Here, visit the volunteer resources page, click on the appropriate tab for your program, and then click on the volunteer role button to reveal all posted materials. Again, keep referring back to these. Most training materials are already posted, but some, if perhaps an event partner creates some training that we find particularly helpful and that's scalable to share with others, then we could also post that on the site as well. At your event, you really want to focus on volunteer care. You want your volunteers to have the best experience they can so that you keep them coming back and they become repeat volunteers. We really emphasize the fact that you need to appoint a volunteer coordinator, and when it says not you in parentheses, that's really aimed at event partners. So we highly recommend that the event partner is not the volunteer coordinator, simply because as an event partner, you're really concerned with running the overall event in every single aspect. You need to appoint someone who can just be concerned with volunteers, with their care, with questions, with directions, and helping them out to really feel like they have someone dedicated to their needs. Also, depending on the size of your event or the venue, you may need reserved parking spots or parking passes. If it's a large parking lot, consider just putting up signs for special volunteer parking spots closer to the venue, just as an added perk to make your volunteers feel really special. Also, provide meals and have plenty of water available. Now, depending on the timing of your event, most typical events provide lunch, but if you have early setup, say at 5, 6, or 7 a.m., you also might want to consider a light breakfast, like pastries and fruit and things like that. Make sure water is available and plentiful. Whether it's bottled water, you have cups for water, or a water cooler, make sure volunteers know where that is and have access to it at all times. An event partner suggested a really good idea is having a break for lunch. We agree with this because I can speak from my own experience as an MC, times where I've had to skip lunch or I've only had 5 minutes because I've been answering questions and I've been on going from field to field. We suggest an all stop. So in other words, have a scheduled lunch break where everything stops. Matches stop, practice fields stop, skills matches stop. Everything stops so that all volunteers have the opportunity to take a pause and eat. That way they're not worried about skipping meals. You don't want a volunteer who has a role that lasts all day not having lunch and feeling bad and having a headache, and they won't come back because that'll be a bad experience. So we suggest an all stop. If you're able to swing it, shut everything down and have a lunch break. Also, if it's in your budget, provide t-shirts. Now, some events and event partners that I've talked to and events that I've gone to, they didn't have a budget themselves for t-shirts. So what they did was they went out to a local business, local sponsor, they got them to sponsor t-shirts. And it's a really cool thing where some businesses maybe are not too keen on sponsoring, say, monetary, or they can't, or it's not in their code. They'll sponsor a t-shirt. They can put their logo on it. It gets you guys some really consistent look and feel for your event, and it also gets your sponsors or local businesses visibility. T-shirts are a win-win. Also provide breaks. Make sure your volunteers get breaks, even especially for those who are, doing roles that are all day. If you have the room, have a volunteer break room or an area. I've gone to events where there's not a dedicated room available, but they just rope off an area with a couple tables. And this is where water and snacks are available. Just someplace your volunteers can get off their feet, take a break, check an email if they need to, or just have, take a breath. Also, give tips to your volunteers. Little things they may not think of. Wear comfy shoes. They're going to be standing a lot. Bring a water bottle, then they can refill it. Have a pocket of lozenges. As a former MC volunteer, I always have a pocket of lozenges. And I'm telling you, the MCs are not the only ones who need these. A lot of volunteer roles really involve engaging with teams and also the audience, students, mentors, all of that. And lozenges can save your life when you're working an all-day shift. Considering those tips for volunteer care, we want to talk about volunteer engagement. So how do you make volunteers feel they are contributing in a meaningful way? Engagement is the key to retention. You want to keep them coming back year after year. Now, think about it. Repeat volunteers are volunteers that you don't have to train and who can step in and help you train new volunteers. So we mentioned this previously. If you have the time, host an orientation session called a night before activity. So if your event is on a Saturday, and you have access to the venue to set up the night before, that can save you a lot of time in the morning. So if you're able to get into the venue and set up, invite volunteers, and those who are available can come not only help with setup, but you can run through some practice matches so they can get a feel for the flow of the event. You also want to recognize volunteers with awards and certificates. There's many ways you can do this, from simply going into the community service certificate template that we provide you, that you can find in the event partner resources, and you can customize that for your event. You can hand that out to every volunteer, putting their name on each certificate, so they at least get a certificate that shows the number of hours they contributed to the event. There's also a Volunteer of the Year trophy that you can order through VEX. So those standard trophy packs that you get include a Volunteer of the Year trophy. You can also order extras through the VEX website. Other event partners choose to have their own custom trophies, and that again is your choice. Or if you want to give out award ribbons or anything like that to make your volunteers feel recognized and appreciated. We absolutely recommend that. You also want to follow up to gauge the satisfaction of your volunteer. Maybe it's a simple survey, maybe it's an email or a phone call to ask them how they enjoyed their experience. Ask them what we could do to improve it, to make it better. And they might give you some ideas that you haven't even thought of. And this last one we just put on there because it's a fun thing. If you have, again, time and budget, not everyone can do this, having a volunteer appreciation party at the end of the season. This is a really fun thing to do in a park or at a bowling alley or maybe mini golf, to just give your volunteers some fun time to mingle and let them know that they're very special. Again, that's budget permitting, but it's a great suggestion if you have the means. If you have some standout volunteers who really went above and beyond to help you out, I would recommend going even one step further and writing a brief recommendation for them on LinkedIn. Now, if you write a recommendation for a volunteer on LinkedIn, I guarantee you they're going to return, because that is a really wonderful way to show your appreciation in a very public manner. So the other thing you can do is give a personal shout out on social media. So if you have a site for Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, any of that type of stuff, or your school, your event, your partner, whatever has a site for that, get photos of your volunteers working and you can tag them. Also tag them along with our tag, which is at REC_foundation. And then we here at the REC Foundation can go ahead and see that photo, and a lot of times we can then retweet and share them. Now, another really cool thing to do when you're getting photos is make sure you're getting photos, volunteers working, volunteers with students, volunteers in their various roles, and then send them to media@roboticseducation.org. This goes straight to our social media managers here at the REC Foundation, and they can then go ahead and post those. So if you email photos to media@roboticseducation.org, just give a quick little blurb. What is the event? Where is it? Who's the volunteer? What are they doing? Anything like that. And we're very happy to share those photos on our Facebook and our Twitter sites. To conclude this presentation, we would like to share best practices. And these are examples from our own experience and our own staff, and also some examples that event partners shared with us at this year's Event Partner Summit. So, starting with the first example is a ringmaster. So this event partner uses a field manager who functions as a ringmaster to make sure that the teams get on the field quickly and that the field reset folks and referees are efficient and that everyone is ready for the next match. So that helps with your flow. Another best practice shared was this event partner asks not to be the referee, the judge advisor, the field manager, or playing any other position. So this event partner really says, if you're an event partner, don't occupy a volunteer position yourself. This ties into when we said, don't be the volunteer coordinator, appoint someone else. So this way, you as an event partner you're able to run the event itself on that day and be available to troubleshoot as needed. Volunteer coordinators, on the other hand, you who are not the event partner, you'll be able to tend to exactly the volunteers and the volunteer needs only. So there's the appoint a volunteer coordinator. We just mentioned that one. So again, it's that same separation of making sure that you as an event partner can focus on your event as a whole and have other volunteers focus on those specific roles. Also provide volunteer training. We've talked about several different ways, methods, and means to do training here in this presentation. So don't let your volunteers try to find resources for themselves. Point them to the correct documents on the REC Foundation website and follow up with them with an in-person training if you can to ensure a smooth event. Again, if possible, host a night before event, if you can run some practice matches or anything where you can connect with volunteers before the actual day of the event to help it run much more smoothly. Now you want to check, this is for event partners, but as the volunteer coordinator, you can ask the event partner to do this. Make sure that you double check and look at what exactly your goal is and what you're setting out to do. And we recommend not planning VRC and IQ events on the same days. Now, the reason is because VRC is a little bit more complicated, the experienced volunteers tend to go to the VRC section, and IQ gets whoever's left standing around, or parents, who maybe are here for a first time and haven't done any training. And that doesn't really provide for a very good experience for those who are in the IQ competition, and it really can stress you out as an event partner. So as a volunteer coordinator, work with your event partner to schedule VRC and IQ events on different days if that's possible. Now we know that sometimes it's not possible and you have to schedule them the same day. If so, just good advanced planning and using the tips that we've given you here should help to staff both of your events. But again, make sure it's done all in advance and make sure both events get plenty of training for your volunteers. So when you're scheduling the events, another thing to do is looking at who is in what volunteer position is that realize you can double up some of your volunteer roles. So for example, check-in folks. After team and volunteer check-in is done, that only lasts for like say the first 2 hours of the day. After that, those volunteers can easily become information table staff. When all the teams are checked in and the match lists are run, you can then still use those volunteers. They can become information table staff, or they can play other roles that you need to fill, even including traffic control. If you need help, if you're in a larger event and you want to make sure no extra parents, coaches, or photographers are on the field, even something like that, you can double up certain volunteer roles. All stop for lunch. So we mentioned this in volunteer care. Shut down the entire event for a scheduled lunch so that no volunteer is forced to stand and eat while overseeing practice fields, etc. So again, this is from my own experience. Sometimes I've had to skip lunch, or I've got 5 minutes to cram a hot dog. It's not ideal for digestion. It's also not ideal for overall health and contributes to stress. So make sure your volunteers have a good experience and do that all stop for that lunch break. Nearby schools. Contact nearby schools who might be interested in starting teams themselves. Offer to show them the ropes. Have them volunteer at your event. And this becomes super helpful for them to see how events are run. And it also provides you with more volunteers. So it's helping you to build the community, and it's helping them to really see how it's done. Repeat volunteers in key roles. So you want to identify volunteers who can come to multiple events in key roles, such as head referee or the field manager that we mentioned, playing the ringmaster role at the top of this slide. And they're really used. These key volunteers are essential to the flow of the event, and they can help direct and train new volunteers if they're familiar with how you run your events and if they've been there before. Also consider running skills challenges in the morning of your event and use that as training for scorekeepers who are new to the game. This is really a great practice, and it helps to build the confidence in your scorekeepers when those matches do start. Also have your dedicated volunteers train a successor, or we call them minions, like an understudy. So if they fall ill, these successors will get more involved. They'll become additional key volunteers, and they can cover if one of your key volunteers, happens to get the flu or just can't make it, has some emergency and cannot make it to your event. Always have key volunteers train a successor or an understudy. Now, after you have some events under your belt, and if you have some best practices to share with us, please let us know. We would absolutely love to hear from you. You see here, this is my contact information with my email and also my phone number. So if you have any questions on this presentation, any burning questions on volunteers specifically, volunteer training, volunteer care, where to find volunteer documentation, or even ideas you'd like to share, please go ahead and drop me a line or drop me an email, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you so much for attending this presentation, and we want you to know that an FAQ for this presentation and for other training presentations for volunteers will be updated monthly and posted on the Event Partner Resources page under the Judge and Volunteer Resources. We want to take the questions that you ask to us and post them, because if you have a question, chances are someone else will have that same question. So we will construct this FAQ. So be sure to check back to that page regularly for those monthly updates. Thank you so much, and good luck with your events.